Beast on the other side, because that does hurt the matchups a little bit when you're talking about control Warlock, right? It wants to hit those control decks because it packs that late game punch, but might struggle to beat some of the faster decks. But we get a Token Druid versus Spell Mage game right off the bat, and decent opening hands for both players.
Yes, very much so. Of course, Encounters Flow, we've talked a little bit about that going into this game. So Luna already having in her opening hand is fantastic. Second piece of that equation will be card draw to really back things up and get things moving. DreadEye, on the other hand, keeping Glowfly Swarm, having Nature Study to even give that opportunity to ramp up into the Glowfly Swarm, and maybe even has opportunities to buff that up with the Pride's Fury, assuming Mage doesn't clear it right off the bat. Luna starts things off with the Primordial Studies, picks up the Blood Mage Thaunos. We talked about card draw, very important. Even better than just having a power spike of an Imprisoned Phoenix into delayed turns, so it all makes sense to start things off. From DreadEye's perspective, an instant Nature Studies into something that's a little bit awkward. Feral Rage, Pounce, Adorable Infestation, all stuff that's mildly useful, but is there anything that stands out to you, TJ, here?
Direct damage is valuable, just because you might run into the situation where at some point the mage ends up clearing your board, and if you don't have reload but you manage to get in some damage, it can be a pretty big deal to just have some extra damage from hand to finish the game. So Feral Rage, Pounce similarly, but doesn't pack as much of a punch, and because he doesn't have the Gibberling right now, it doesn't make sense to kind of pick something super cheap with the hopes of drawing it. He's got a decent curve with Glowfly Swarm. If it sticks, got big buffs to back it up. So I do like the Feral Rage pick just to have that direct damage available.
Yes, I like that. And it just gives DreadEye some flexibility, which is important as you start entering these mid-game combo turns that Druid is looking for. I'm going to start things off with the Rune Door, picks up Ring Toss, a very good way to stabilize your board if you feel like you want to either protect yourself or you want to find even sources of card draw through the rigged fair game. So DreadEye not really doing anything except preparing for that Glowfly Swarm turn. Also picks up the Solar Eclipse, so really big combos available. Wow, some big stuff coming into the hand of Luna as well, finding a Canvas Flow and a Refreshing Spring Water in back-to-back draws.
Yeah, this turn a little awkward, just because she wants to be able to play this in Canvas Flow before the Spring Water. So this might just be like a Fireball to face, as awkward as that seems. Because of the way that in Canvas Flow with Refreshing Spring Water will work next turn, she'll be able to play anything that she would have drawn anyway, so there's not much reason to kind of play around it. But Ring Toss could provide, even though it's not corrupted, could provide some valuable disruption. Or, wow, okay, Rigged Fair Game is very likely insane, because it's unlikely that DreadEye will attack face on this turn. He's most likely going to build up a board. So, nicely spotted.
DreadEye coining, trying to see if he can test a counter spell. Does not see it, sees Rigged Fair Game. Something that probably makes him a little bit nervous. You see the Shooting Star, for example. That's a card that could potentially punish him if he had a little bit extra spell damage. But now Luna goes for the Incantus Flow and the Refreshing Spring Water, and ideally picks up cards to figure out a way to dissect his board. Combustion deals with 3 of these Glowflies. Another Combustion and a Rune Door. Perfect dissection. And DreadEye, pretty sad to see the case, because I mean, he was ramping up to combo with this. He had Soul of the Forest, he had Pride's Fury, lots of ways to keep his board alive. It's all gone.
It's all gone. That Rigged Fair Game, the decision to go for Ring Toss was actually insane from Luna. I think a lot of players end up tunneling on, I can't really play Ring Toss until I corrupt it, right? So I can get the full value from it. But recognizing an opportunity not only to hit Counterspell, which would have, delayed the board generation from DreadEye for another turn. But also Rigged Fair Game, understanding that when DreadEye sets up this big hand, it's very likely that he's going to go for a board generation, not deal damage to the face. So it paying off in spades.
I agree. I think cards like Ring Toss, You know, while it can be frustrating at times when you don't get the secret that you're specifically looking for, I feel like it does represent opportunities for skill expression moments like what you just saw from Luna, having an ability to kind of have the ideal scenario and then a good backup option in case it doesn't work out, and it's controlled, of course, within the environment of secrets. So I'm a big fan of it. I do agree. I think a lot of people get baited by the fact that you can get 2 secrets off of it, and plus you get a really cool corrupted turtle who kind of freaks out to Gary the snail somehow. Luna goes for the second ring toss, this time maybe looking for an opportunity to disrupt yet another set of spells. Ideally looking for counterspell to stop a explosive turn with, you know, follow-up combos from the Druid, but does get stuck with a couple of awkward choices. It's not like Mirandi is super good against a spell-based deck. Oasis ally, no minions to attack into, so it has to feel like Ice Barrier from Luna's perspective. And then she does pick up the counterspell, which I think she chose. Those a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I imagine it was. Break Fair game wouldn't be great in this situation because she doesn't even have the hand space. So, it looks like Counterspell and Ice Barrier, the secret's chosen.
Ooh. Love the hold on the Cobalt Geomancer as well, because there's just so many ways to combo with it. Just because you have 1 mana doesn't mean you should spend it. Contrary to what a lot of the other streamers love to do. And people ask generic advice in chat, like, what should I be doing to improve as a player? I think one of the most common pieces that you hear is like, make sure that, you know, your decks are good. Make sure that, you know, you bought as many packs from Hearthstone so you can improve your RNG. But, you know, more specifically, people say spend your mana. And in this case, Luna has so many ways to combo with it. Cram Session, Shooting Star, obviously Burn to the Face. There's a lot of different things that she has available to her. More than half her hand costs 0 mana, TJ. She's got so many things that she could be pulling off here.
Yeah, the only issue is still needs to find a way to get enough damage to end the game while not being vulnerable to these crazy boards. But Fireball, Pegasus Blast, double Mask in hand. Mask can be useful to try and clean up boards, but at this point, DreadEye has access to so much mana that it's likely that his boards are going to be too big, though. She also has double Devolving Missiles, so maybe that's not... Ooh! A Font of Power for a single minion. Just realizing that her hand is very situational. It's going to be hard for her to dump a lot of these cards unless she wants to just play completely reactively. I really like this.
Yeah, it gets rewarded. The Font of Power is not the win condition of this situation. Find the Trick Totem!
All right, we're looking for Power of the Wild. Minefield, oh
no! Okay, it's all good. Druid does not have swipe or any AoE like that, so... You know, that was definitely an interesting series of events. I don't think Luna could have predicted it would have turned out like that, but it's all right. Lunar Eclipse ends up proccing the counter spell that's set up for DreadEye, and I think DreadEye's expression pretty much says it all. A lot of mana ramp, a lot of ways to build up an existing board. His entire hand pretty much is ready to finish a game, assuming he stuck anything, a Glowfly Swarm or some early tokens. But he's got nothing.
He's got nothing.
How can you tell me that 8 cards and 12 mana available this turn and you got no plays except Hero Power and Lunar Eclipse? That's just the state of DreadEye's hand.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. And I think now with how this is played out, Luna could start throwing Burn to the Face, could go Mask of Cthulhu into Ring Toss. Could also just go a Pegasus Blast because a Pegasus Blast builds up a board, and Druids just don't have really great ways to deal with boards. Whoa!
Yeah. Ring Toss as well to back it up. You know, you summarized it really well, TJ. Didn't DreadEye just show that he couldn't deal with a board state?
Yep.
Why not just do it again?
Do it again, yep. Swindle.
Swindle?
Okay. That's great. Sure. Draw a card.
Okay. So next turn we have the ability to cast double Fireball with all of these spells to back it up and reduce the board state. With spell damage still existing, DreadEye has to, once again, test for Counterspell. But we're rapidly approaching the point where I don't think DreadEye can wait anymore because there is 11 power represented. Luna has drawn 26 cards. Actually 27 by the time it passes back to her. So very likely that you're dead if you just do nothing. And you can see that DreadEye trying to be a little bit nifty with it. Netherwind Portal summons another minion that DreadEye has to deal with. And now has to go in, but I think he knows that this is just a last-ditch effort. This game feels very over.
Yeah. It was essentially... He didn't know it at the time, but all in on that first Glowfly Swarm, the ways he ended up drawing with his hand. And while this is a very powerful board, there's just lethal represented, and even if there wasn't, even if Luna's burn was all tucked into the very bottom, the last 3 cards, Luna had the ability to just clear things up with devolving missiles.
Yeah, there's just straight up double fireball lethal from here from Luna.
Yeah, I don't know
damage.
What the should maybe trying to get.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
With Mask of Cthulhu, but
it's entirely unnecessary. But the spell damage. I think maybe Luna's like, oh, I have the 12 damage and the fireball, even the fireball ping, right? Because there's 10 on the board. Plus the 2 fireballs supposed to ping, that'd be 23 even if there wasn't spell damage.
Yeah. Okay. All right, she realized it. She realized it.
Yeah. All right.
DreadEye, look at his face. He's like, oh, jeez. Wasting both of our times right now.
Is it intentional? Was it an accident? Doesn't even really matter. It was a little bit fun. A nice human moment, if you will, because yes, even Grandmasters are capable of missing small little details. And you know, sometimes we don't realize how much we're tied to assumptions, right? If we see a 2-mana card, we don't really necessarily think that it's Fireball, even at the top of the head, even if you've like looked at it and you've acknowledged it, like, oh, cool, I drew a Fireball. So just little moments of humanity, if you will. That's right, Luna does even every now and then might miss a small detail for about 20 seconds, despite her greatness and her consistency over the years. So the story of the game, DJ, you summarized it well, which is the Glowfly Swarm and DreadEye's inability to deal with it as he stares into the abyss of just watching Mage destroy everything that he ever tries to accomplish by drawing 14 more cards over the opponent. Just look at that deck size difference. It tells you everything.
Yeah. And I don't think, you know, this is that big of a deal. I guess the Mage taking a win is somewhat important given the rest of DreadEye's lineup. He does have some decks that are susceptible to Mage, but Mage has just been crushing it for so long that you kind of expect it to take a win in these Conquest series at some point or another. And the Token Druid does still have some good matchups remaining. Warlock can, even if you hit removal early on, Warlock can even struggle with Token Druid because their removal is so one-dimensional. They don't have like this disruption or this like multiple waves of removal. And if you can stick like a Soul of the Forest board at any time, you can threaten lethal. But Luna's going to move to Control Priest. We'll see if Control Warlock versus Token Druid is a matchup that's going to come into play. But this is an interesting Control Priest, right? It's got N'Zoth in the Light Shower Elemental South Sea Scoundrel package. It also has Cthulhu and double Cabal Acolyte. So this is like the one pretty greedy lineup, all things considered. 2 has to be fantastic in Priest Mirrors because you have everything that you want in Priest Mirrors. You have South Sea Scoundrels. You have ways to mitigate fatigue with just Cthulhu, and then a ton of board presence and ways to just 2-for-1 your opponent with Cabal Acolyte. So now DreadEye doesn't have Priest, but the deck, just N'Zoth, the N'Zoth package with Light Shower Elementals, I do think gives you better game against some of the board-centric decks. Talking about Rush Warrior, talking about Rogue. So I really like this choice from Luna to go with this specific version of Control Priest this week.
Might be the most expensive deck list I've ever seen of Control Priest. 14,000 dust and change, featuring 2 Old Gods, the new Ysera, and of course some of the other stuff that we've talked a little bit about. And of course ways to generate even more value, right? A lot of these cards generate other cards for you to play, and all cost certain things. So it's just chock full of stuff late game. It also kind of skips that mid-game curve, right? There's like a ton of cards from 1 to 4 mana, maybe like 1 minion at 6, and then just like late-game stuff, which is just very typical of Control these days. Control feels like it's largely defined by the options of the removal, and removal has been getting cheaper and more efficient for quite some time in Hearthstone now, especially with the resource generation available to Priest. Speaking of, Luna has picked up the palm reading and held it, needs to find a good reaction to early Druid boards, because AoE is something that surprisingly Priest does not play very much of, especially if they're not playing Condemns naturally into the deck. There is access to it, right, in the form of like Hysteria, which is soft AoE, and then Zyrella and a couple of other things. But Luna, of course, going to be looking for ways to make sure that she can survive big turns from that Druid. Although these early gameplays with the Draconic studies, finding heavy dragons is not really it for now, but maybe they can come into play later.
Yeah, this is not the best choice. I guess Ysera, I was thinking potentially Deathwing to just have that kind of super late game insurance. But if you think about it, Ysera would come down a turn earlier and give you access to Ysera Awakens, which kind of serves the same purpose as a Deathwing in that situation. So, and Gibberling played on 1. You love to see it. I like this play a lot. I think that there's because Luna's not playing Holy Smite or even Condemn, that this is a wise play. And I don't think there's a single way that she can actually deal with a Gibberling, except for renew into some Holy Smite, right? So, very cool.
We talked about exactly this issue, right? There's not a lot of access to AoE in comparison to, say, how Control Warrior likes to play, which feels like they largely play either giant AoE effects or big single target removal. Priest is a lot more about value over time, as Luna does play the Scorpion to find access to, again, cards that are better in slower matchups, but Druid might not give you the time to do so. Powered Fortitude is intriguing had Luna found a Blademaster Samuro, because that is another card that Priest has in their arsenal for AoE. And looks like Luna is picking it up for the opportunity maybe later down the road, because I don't think she's optimistic about the Scorpion's chances of surviving. DreadEye instantly removes it, picks up 3 more potential cards with the Fungal Fortunes, as it's mainly spells, so it should be the case. And everything looks way better than the previous game for DreadEye here.
Yeah, and this, I think, is just not a deck-building victory, because, DreadEye's just playing standard Token Druid, but it's just a lineup mismatch. Luna obviously wasn't trying to target Token Druid with this Priest deck, with no Holy Smites, no Condemns, not really a way to deal with any wide board states outside of Zyrella and Blademaster Samuro, which usually come down a little bit too late. Soulmere could be okay, but it's still a turn away, and DreadEye is just going to drive home this board.
I mean, DreadEye is so close to even just finishing the game, despite Luna being at 29 life, and then you see it, the Solar Eclipse, the Arbor up, just missing the mana. Even if Luna clears it, there's 2 more waves of threats. The Glowfly Swarms, the Thorngrowth Sentries, and the Arbor Ups to really send it home. Now, Luna does have a couple of different things that she could do about this board. The Cabal Acolyte is intriguing just because it puts a taunt in the way and it steals one of these Gibberlings. And you can activate it through the Draconic studies. But the part of the problem is that Luna long-term doesn't have a way to even deal with this board. And so just even one single Arbor Up is already a giant threat, giving it +2 attack to all of these Gibberlings and starting to pressure her life total. So what does she choose to go about here? Or how does she choose to go about this?
I think it honestly has to be the Cabal Acolyte with the way this hand is. Still can just play Draconic States. Okay, Onyx Mage Scribe. She really just has to hope that DreadEye's hand is still a bunch of board generation and not a bunch of board buffs. Right? She has to hope that he's just kind of stuck with Thorngrowth Sentries, with Glowfly Swarms, with other Gibberlings and card draw. and that she can buy a couple more turns before she's able to get access to like multiple waves of big removal. But it's just not going to be the case.
Oh, how the turntables. 10 cards difference between Luna and DreadEye here, TJ. I mean, that was the exact reverse of what happened in the previous game where Luna had, 10, 12, 14 cards over DreadEye drawn deeper into the deck just to overwhelm you. Strength with numbers, zerg your opponent down. Luna can play the Soul of the Soul Mirror right now to even benefit from it by having Soul of the Forest minions being copied and as a result challenge the treants. The other option would be to play an Onyx Mini Scribe, try to go for other spells, but those are pretty much the two options that I spot right now. And I think that this makes almost too much sense for Luna to try and stabilize to ensure that she just doesn't die to a follow-up play on DreadEye's board.
Yeah, this will just leave the 2 2/2s though, so there's no lethal just yet. But it doesn't matter. All DreadEye has to do is keep playing these cards. At some point, with how much refill he has, a board is going to stick, a wide board is going to stick, and then Solar Eclipse plus Arbor Up will end things. But Zyrella, okay, that is an insane pickup.
Yes. Now Luna gets to clear the board and stick a board. That's the first time that she's been able to do that this game. The previous turn, she stuck a board, but it was immediately removed. There's nothing really DreadEye can do about this, and DreadEye has lost a lot of tempo and momentum. You can see him kind of leaning forward. The gamer lean. Oh, okay, now it's time to get serious. And now DreadEye can refill again. That being said, he doesn't find a good way to stay ahead on the board. There's ways for Luna to really capitalize on this. We're talking about Hysteria, just like really picking apart the board if DreadEye goes for a tall thing with a lot of health. And it can end up being one of these things disastrous for DreadEye where it just removes like half of his board for Luna, even if it's not necessarily something that you're trying to plan for. And then the moment Luna picks up Blademaster Samuro, she's just going to rebound in health and dominate. And what can you really do against an 8-9 health minion that's going to heal and sustain every single turn?
You try and push past it, but we'll see if it gets to that point. Luna will have to try and dig and find some other ways to keep dealing with the board state. Hysteria could end up being quite good because of the Iron Bark, as you mentioned, and even Pride's Fury coming down here. But I don't know if it'll clear up enough stuff. Nothing's at 5 attacks. Shadow Word Death doesn't have value.
Right.
And it'll only take 3 hits, so it'll kill like 1, maybe 2 if it can snipe the 1/1 Dribbling. And this is also awkward because she doesn't have a great way to activate the Onyx Mage Scribe spell burst for cheap. It would have to be like Apotheosis on the Zyrella. And then only 2 mana remaining. A Condemn wouldn't clear off enough of this board. It's still looking rough.
What do you think about buffing the Taunted Gibberling with Powered Fortitude, or just some kind of card? Doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be that. And then using Hysteria. Just like building up a really strong opposing minion and then using Hysteria to ideally clear. That's one thing that also came to my head for like a trick that Priest has up their sleeve. Some combination, but still going to use Zyrella and the Lifesteal. Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. That actually worked out incredible.
I can't believe it.
That was like nearly the perfect outcome.
You don't pick the one.
Because it killed the maximum number of things.
Yeah. And even the flexibility of playing the Wand Maker for a 1-mana spell in case Luna found something really impactful. Finds Flash Heal. And slowly but surely, DreadEye is running out of resources. He's already used both of his Fungal Fortunes and it gets the weight, I believe. So his board is pretty much going to have 2 more waves. He's throwing to grow Sentries with the solidification of Power of the Wild, Soul of the Forest, and Arbor Up. Those are the main ways that DreadEye is thinking about comboing his board. Can use the Soul of the Forest here. Ignore the Zyrella. Life isn't really the key. It's about having a stable board. But now if I'm Luna, I feel tempted to even go beyond. Is this an opportunity to play Ysera, dream back one of the minions, and then have Ysera Awakens in the hand? This is a really powerful opportunity for Luna to swing things.
Time may pass, but the dream is eternal.
Yeah, there's still not going to be enough minions on board, especially since Luna's going to be at full health for DreadEye to really go for much.
Yeah, DreadEye was hoping that by sticking a board, he could Solar Eclipse, Arbor Up, and Power the Wild, go for the ultimate amount of burst that the Druid can pull off. But we're starting to see a little bit of Luna's calculations here. One thing that's a little bit awkward is that trading into a Thorngrove Sentry actually improves the power on the board.
But it also makes it so that the removal next turn is easier, so I think it's necessary. I don't think there's a single break point that kills her from this position, even putting more power on board. And because the Zyrella is so big with Apotheosis, she's also not worried about DreadEye trying to set up a 2-turn lethal by making a giant board either. So I think this is a great spot.
Yep, so 3, 6, 9 power on the board already. 2 times Arbor Up would add 16, so 25. Power of the Wild is 28, 29? Wait, and then Hero Power? Does he have enough mana to Hero Power?
No, it's an Innervate, not a Lightning Boom, so not enough to Hero Power.
Ah, that's so close, DJ!
Oh, and it's weak to...
Yeah, Sarah Awakens? Oh, he's so close! Oh, look,
is he a
Luna cut it as close as possible.
Oh, Soul Mirror! There's not enough board space to get all the tokens, though.
Right.
Soul Mirror and Ysera Awakens is still enough to clear.
Yeah, and you have Dream as well.
That was really close. If that was a Lightning Boom instead of an Innervate, that would have been lethal.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Or, you know, an Adorable Infestation was in the hand.
Or, yeah, Adorable Infestation.
Yeah. There were several ways that Luna could have died. Granted, it would take 5-card combinations, so it's unlikely. But at the same time, DreadEye's drawn so many cards from the deck. So this was a calculation from Luna's end, but it wasn't completely sealed. But sometimes you gotta take a little bit of those risks in order to try and lock in the game here. From Luna's perspective, she's very close to stabilizing. The Dream has the ability to trade, clear the board, rebound up to double digits in health, and even redevelop the board here. This is lights out here for DreadEye. He came so close to going for a 1-turn kill, set up 1 card drawn deeper with that second Innervate would have done it too. What a back and forth game that was. Luna up 2-0, but boy, was that close.
That was incredibly close. And after a pretty rough start, right, not really finding ways to deal with boards until, turn 5, essentially, and then having to rely on Zyrella to bail her out of that situation. And I do like the way that she navigated the late game situation, because I said that there was no breakpoints, but I guess with like an exact combination, like you mentioned, of 5 cards, there was one scenario where she dies if she doesn't Dream there, but realized that, it was about the next turn and trying to stop the very last wave of pressure from DreadEye before she went for the full clear. And also, like, Dream in that situation, if she dreams a Gibberling, it gives DreadEye another way to build up a board and potentially could throw her off, right? Since her removal was planned. But a very impressive game. And now she's up to 2-0. It's just Control Warlock left.
Control Warlock is pretty good, but you were really hoping to get a good matchup for it originally, and now Luna, I mean, you just have to play 3 matchups with this Warlock and hope that it's good enough to beat some of these faster paced decks. And the good news is that Warlock, we talk about removal options and how AoE seems to be some things that decks are cutting. Warlock's got plenty of that. Even some spicy stuff like Malygos, the Spellweaver, not something that you see all the time, but it can be teched in very powerfully to bolster the card draw, especially if you're getting a Lord Draxus scenario. Really cool stuff coming out from the Warlocks these days, and it is something that is less popular but effective. For example, Asia Pacific, 0 Warlocks being brought this week, while Americas and Europe has a few people doing so. DreadEye once more queuing up Token Druid, hoping to do what he was setting out in game number 1, which is get a win with this entire list of 2-ofs. Is the Token Druid going to be able to take down the Warlock? Theoretically, the Warlock only has the turn to play like one form of AoE, so if you have Soul to Farce, it becomes really tricky for them to deal with in terms of layering it. But that was what we thought about in previous games as well, and Token Druid has just not been able to get over the hump here for DreadEye.
Yeah, but I do think this is one of the better matchups for Token Druid because they just have so much staying power, and they're not... unlike Priest, they're not really building up their own boards behind it, right? If Luna was just removing the board in the Priest game every turn and not really doing anything to back it up, like not generating a board simultaneously, the game would have been a lot different because DreadEye eventually would have stuck a board and that would have been enough. And that's kind of how I feel about this matchup where, sure, you could have all the School Spirits and Twisting Nethers in the world, but at some point, the Druid will stick a board and then you're relying on a bunch of small minions to get you over the finish line. I think the big deal here is the double Ogremancer, because Ogremancer can give you those ways to fight back against a spell-based deck. And so if you're able to remove boards, find a dead turn from the Druid to play an Ogremancer, and then follow that up with bigger minions, that kind of gives you that X factor, that little bit of extra wiggle room in the matchup to actually find a win. I mean, just yesterday, we saw, I think it was in the, it was Nalgidon or Eddie. I can't even remember. It wasn't Eddie because he had already qualified for the group. We saw a near perfect hand from Control Warlock, just not able to get the job done because Token Druid just kept refilling board after board after board and eventually found lethal outs. So you need a lot.
Yeah, very much so. The Warlock, part of the reason why you don't see Warlock being more prominently featured is because it's very much intended as a deck that's good against certain other archetypes, mainly Control. It's, the Control Buster, but struggles a lot, at least data-wise, against things like Mage or the aggressive decks that you see on ladder, large because it just didn't get time to set up. But against Token Druid, slightly losing matchup if you just look at the basic ladder stats. And I wonder if any of these small techs that some players are bringing could help influence things. Starting things off on the right foot, though. Spirit Jailer on 1. What you want to see. And DreadEye already just kind of feeling like, oh, is this going to be one of those things where another favorable matchup does not go my way?
I mean, does still need a way to develop a board, but also has Fungal Fortunes to kind of smooth things out, smooth out the curve. So not in panic mode just yet, but could get there very soon if these don't pick up the board generation.
Oh, no.
Loses a Gibberling.
Yeah. There's only the Gibberling really in the deck for you to risk discarding. And he's lost it. Luna picks up the other 1-mana minion, Armor Vendor, just to give some extra board presence. It's not super relevant, the timing of when you play Armor Vendor. You just want to get it out, plus free up your hand space. DreadEye now has no way to really set up the board through Glowfly Swarm. Has entirely hand buffs. I guess you could play Arbor Up or Power of the Wild just for what you want on the board. This is the exact kind of setup that leads to a Warlock victory. Luna finds the other one, drops Spirit Jailer, more Soul Fragments being shuffled in. At this pace, Luna has better tempo than DreadEye, and it's not improving.
Not at all. This is brutal.
Question. You have the ability to go for the Solar Eclipse and Arbor Up. Do you go for it here?
I think you have to. Because we're starting to get to those, you know, obviously Ogremancer can come down next turn. And so if you're behind on board and an Ogremancer comes down, you just have no chance, right? It's so much wiggle room for the Warlock to do whatever they want. So I think that the turn prior to the Ogremancer coming down is kind of the last-ditch effort. And, all right, it's just going to go full in.
I mean, DreadEye going hard in the paint. I mean, this is full committal of resources outside of his remaining buff cards. He is hoping that he can go all the way with just this board. And Luna does have some cards to help fight against it, but this is definitely a situation that's not comfortable for her. What's the best way to pick apart this board? Can you survive this onslaught? Because that is lethal being represented right now.
There's Soul Shear, which can clear off just 1 minion by itself, and then School Spirits can get rid of 2 more. So she can take 3 minions off the board, and you're still not leaving that much power, and DreadEye is incredibly overloaded next turn.
Yeah, got 1 mana next turn, it seems like.
Yeah. So really going to be nothing coming out from his side unless another Adorable Infestation's picked up.
Still, though, 13 damage is 13 damage.
That's right.
A little under half of Luna's life. Soul Frag is being drawn to restore some of that life. And then Hysteria can clear off 2 of these minions, and then you can play an Armor Vendor. Is the first play that stuck out to me. I'm wondering if Luna is greedy enough to life tap here as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a significant downside. I think she has enough Soul Fragments in the deck to kind of make up for it. You're killing off 2 minions. Maybe just actually play the Armor Vendor just to challenge what's on board, even though it's very unlikely to, because there's probably going to be a buff coming down, but...
Yeah, exactly. It's one of these things where DreadEye doesn't have the flexibility of not really dealing with this 1-3. So if DreadEye, you know, draws this entire turn, which he's starting off. You know, this feels like the series, the game that Grandmasters doesn't want DreadEye to win this series for some reason. I don't know. Something is in the water today. It's just not being it's not being very gracious to him. And now this Armor Vendor gets a challenge. Luna gets to even tempo if she would like to with the Ticketus. The thing I like about Ticketus is that it also upgrades Cascading Disaster, but I don't know how relevant that is, considering that she just picked up Twisting Nether.
Soul Fragment, Soul Fragment, Soul Shear. Okay.
Reasonable stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this game is very likely to end before she gets to the bottom of the deck, right? And so... it's like the discards are likely to just not matter in the slightest. Just having an 8-8 on board is worth more than anything else.
Okay.
It's a little awkward because Twisting Nether removes the Ticketus as well.
Well, Cascading Disaster just got upgraded, so she could use it twice and clear off half the board. More than half the board right now.
Yeah. And then has
trade?
Yasharash.
Yeah, exactly. And the trade makes sense because Luna's win condition is actually just to stabilize the board repeatedly. And eventually, over time, she's just going to have, you know, counter-lethal swings.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is perfectly baited as well. I mean, not that DreadEye has a choice. DreadEye is feeling like his window has been closing. Warlock has been drawing a bunch of cards, needs to present something. And then the Twisting Nether immediately comes out. And now DreadEye once more stalled out. And Luna still has more ammo and reload. She's got the Malagos. The supply chain is also ready to go.
And DreadEye likely to, stop at 4 minions here and try and buff them up with either Pride's Fury or Power of the Wild, which means that Yasharaj plus the double corrupted Cascading Disaster that she played earlier in the game will be enough to clear the board. So it just feels like at every step of the way. And because the Gibberlings were discarded, and not only discarded, but kind of interrupting the card draw, right? Drawing one less card because of it.
Oh my goodness. Hey, some days you're the bird, some days you're the statue. And DreadEye, today, you are very much the statue, my friend. Oh, I feel bad. And that's going to be pretty much all she wrote for this series, it seems like, because Luna has now ways to counter-aggress versus DreadEye. He sets up a board, she removes, and pushes 10. And I think from DreadEye's perspective, his best chance is to build this board, hope that Luna has no more removal, has, cards like Jiraxis maybe, just slow cards that can't keep up with the amount of minions on the board.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be enough because you see there's removal.
Yeah, unless she draws Soul Fragment, she has 3. And that's full bowl clear. just the perfect amount of Soul Fragments left in the deck in order to completely clear this board.
The Drain Soul, there's no mercy whatsoever. Also, some really quick turns from Luna, just because there's not much to think about from here. 3-0, Luna advances to the top 4 once more, making a very big charge to try and go to the top of the standings. She comes into this week at 15 points. An opportunity to definitely take top 2 over Nalgidon and Eddie, but maybe an opportunity to even go further beyond that. But we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. Just to recap, the massacre that was known as Game 3. Token Druid, when Warlock draws like this, Token Druid can't do anything, it feels like, TJ.
Yeah, it's really difficult to try and piece together win conditions. And, DreadEye did have, I like that turn, going for, pre-Ogremancer, trying to develop a big board. That was solid. Then after that, just didn't have anything, right? No Gibberlings. As soon as that second Glowfly Swarm was played and removed by the double Cascading Disaster, that was it. DreadEye just had a kind of piecemeal to try and develop boards and ended up running out of cards. So, yeah, those are the games that, Warlock's gonna steamroll. And, sometimes it can be difficult if you can't develop a board. I think the Ticketus was an important play.